I'm Michelle Romero-Fishback with the Safer Consumer Products program at DTSC. Welcome to our series of training videos on complying with priority product regulations. See the full list of videos on the SCP training materials webpage or in the YouTube description. Here, we will discuss the alternatives analysis threshold and how it applies to priority products. We will describe what an alternatives analysis threshold, or AAT, is, and when DTSC might set one. We'll spend the bulk of this presentation explaining the AAT notification and its requirements, what information you, the manufacturer, must submit to request an exemption from the alternatives analysis process, and lastly, we will describe the timeline when to submit an AAT notification, as well as additional information required to keep your AAT notification up to date. An alternatives analysis threshold refers to a concentration, level, or the amount of chemical of concern in a priority product specified by DTSC. When the concentration is above the threshold, the product requires further analysis. If the chemical concentration in your product is above the AAT notification does not apply. You will need to select one of the other compliance options. This can be removal or replacement of the chemical, removal of the product from the California market, or conducting an alternatives analysis. If the concentration of the chemical of concern in your product is at or below the AAT, you may not need to conduct an alternatives analysis. You will need to submit an AAT notification, or AATN, to request an exemption from completing an alternatives analysis or one of the other compliance options. Under what circumstances is an AAT set? DTSC only sets an alternatives analysis threshold under certain circumstances. We must set an AAT when the chemical of concern in a priority product is a contaminant. When the chemical of concern is an intentionally added ingredient, DTSC has the option of setting an AAT. The rationale for these decisions will be explained in the rulemaking documents for that priority product. The AAT notification provides evidence that the chemical of concern in your product is at or below the AAT, and is a request for an exemption from conducting an alternatives analysis and from complying with further regulatory requirements. It is important to note that the manufacturer bears the burden of proof to demonstrate that the concentration of the chemical of concern in its priority product does not exceed the AAT threshold. You, the manufacturer, have control over the chemicals used to make your product, so you have the exclusive duty to comply with this part of the SCP regulations. Occasionally, there are questions about who qualifies as the manufacturer of a product. The SCP regulations define a manufacturer as any person who manufactures a product for purchase in California, including online, or any person who controls the manufacturing process for the product or specifies the use of chemicals to be included in the product. Note that regardless of where the manufacturers are located, inside or outside the United States, they must comply if their products are for sale in California. Importantly, to be considered a manufacturer for the purpose of the AAT notification, you must have the ability to specify what chemicals are or are not included in the product. If your company buys a pre-formulated product and makes only non-material alterations, such as affixing a brand label, you will be considered an assembler under the SCP regulations, unless you have the ability to specify what chemicals are or are not used in the product. Manufacturers who suspect the chemical of concern is present in their products at a concentration less than or equal to the AAT should submit an AAT notification. Now we'll talk about the elements that need to be included in an AAT notification. First, the identification information should include the name and contact information of the person submitting the AAT notification and that of any known responsible entities or REs. Second, a statement certifying that the chemical of concern in the product does not exceed the AAT specified by DTSC. Third, information describing the source of the chemical in the product. Next, information about the priority product itself. This includes information identifying and describing the priority product, the brand name or names, and labeling information under which the product is placed into the stream of commerce in California. Also, if the priority product is a component of one or more assembled products, you must include a description of the known product or products in which the component is used. Also, a manufacturer can verify that the chemical of concern is at or below the AAT by conducting lab testing of its product. In addition, DTSC requires that you demonstrate and certify that you will continue to meet the criteria and conditions that are the basis for the exemption from the alternatives analysis. It is important to point out that lab testing information may look different for different chemicals of concern and for different priority products. What we list here applies to a case where the AAT has been set for a priority product and for which laboratory testing requirements are described in the priority product regulations. In this case, if the manufacturer has lab testing done as part of the AAT notification submittal, they must submit laboratory analytical testing methodology, quality control and assurance protocols, identification of the testing laboratory, and analytical data. Please note that DTSC will issue a 15-day notice to adopt requirements outlining the method performance criteria for any analytical lab testing that must be met for manufacturers to demonstrate compliance with the AAT notification requirements. Now that we know what to include in your AAT notification, let's look at the timeline. The AAT notification is due at the same time a preliminary AA report would have been due. That is 180 days after the priority product regulation becomes effective. However, you have the option of complying earlier to ensure you have enough time to complete the online submittal process, as this can be lengthy. You have the option to submit your AAT notification when submitting your priority product notification. That is 60 days from the time the regulation becomes effective. We want to remind you that while 180 days may seem like a long time, we recommend you start preparing as soon as the regulation becomes effective, since lab testing or compiling suppliers' information will take time and effort. There are certain conditions under which DTSC requires manufacturers to submit additional notifications after the original AAT notification submission. If the information provided in the original AAT notification changes, you must submit a revised alternatives analysis threshold notification within 30 days of the change. Examples of changes include the contact information of the person who submitted the AAT notification, a related responsible entity's contact information, or information about manufacturers or importers. Another condition requiring an additional notification is when the priority product no longer meets the criteria for an AAT exemption. For example, when the concentration of the chemical of concern exceeds the AAT. In this case, you must notify DTSC within 30 days of the change. In addition, within 180 days of the change, you must submit either a preliminary AA report or an applicable intent and/or confirmation notification. The CalSafer website is where you will complete the submission process for your priority product notification, alternatives analysis threshold notification, and even an intent and/or confirmation notification or any AA reports if those special conditions apply. On the CalSafer website and our SCP training materials webpage, there are several training videos available that are designed to walk you through each submittal process. In this video, we reviewed the definitions and information related to alternatives analysis thresholds, or AATs, and how and when to file an AAT notification to request an exemption from conducting an alternatives analysis. For further information, please refer directly to our SCP regulations webpage, where you can find more information about the SCP regulations and a link to the regulations themselves. We also encourage you to join the SCP program email list, or e-list, to receive the latest information and updates from the department on upcoming regulations, events, and workshops. Finally, if you have any further questions, feel free to contact us at saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov. Thank you.